All right, so first up, I want to introduce myself. I'm Aubrey Phillips. I'm Pinellas County Strategic Performance Manager, and I've been helping to facilitate program development for emergency rental assistance. Thank you all for participating and attending today. We're so happy to have so many folks on the call and interested in this new program. This will be an informational webinar about new programs, but it's also a chance for us to hear from you. So to help ensure that everyone's able to participate to the fullest extent practical, we're going to start by setting some ground rules for today's session. Excuse me, I'm looking at speaking notes on other slides. First off, be respectful of others. Respond to others how you would want to be responded to. We're all here to try to address the same impacts that COVID has had on our community. So let's, in that spirit, work together. Keep an open mind, listen carefully. There are some key differences between this program and other assistance programs that you, as landlords and property managers, you need to be aware of. Definitely ask questions to gain understanding and clarity. If something's unclear, help us address it by asking questions. Fourthly, share your constructive feedback. You have important insights given your relationship with your tenants. So help us improve the program by sharing your feedback. And finally, please help us to keep the discussion on track. We want to be respectful to everybody's time today. So stick to the topic and try not to ramble. If you do provide a speaking comment or question, respect the time limitations. So more on how to participate. There are 3 ways to participate. During the course of the webinar, as we're sharing information, you can post questions in chat at the bottom of the screen. I'm sorry, you'll see Q&A at the bottom of the screen. It's not called chat. You'll see Q&A at the bottom of the screen where you can type in a question. You can also upvote or thumbs up questions from others if you have the same question. Jill Riddle, who I'll introduce shortly, will be monitoring those questions. So as they're relevant to the materials that we're presenting, we'll stop and address those in the webinar to the extent that they make sense. We're also planning to have some time at the end to open it up to questions. We'll address any that are still outstanding in the chat as time allows, but also that'll provide an opportunity that you can raise your hand during that time, and we'll call on attendees to be able to ask questions live. Please keep those questions to a 2-minute limit. We'll provide a reminder when we get to that point in the webinar, but that'll help us to stay on track with today's schedule. All right, so going on to talk about why we're here today. Our intent is to provide an overview of new emergency rental assistance programs in Pinellas County, specifically for property managers and landlords. We worked hard, and thank you to many partners, many of whom are on the call, who helped get the word out about today's webinar. We will be following up to offer additional outreach directly to tenants, but our target today is to make sure that landlords and property managers have information about the programs and can help connect tenants to them. After a quick welcome, we'll talk about who and what is eligible for assistance, how to apply, what tenants need from you as property managers and landlords, what resources are available to help you with the program, and then we'll wrap up, as I mentioned earlier, with some time for Q&A. As much as our time is limited, this is intended to be a 2-way conversation. We really want your questions and feedback to help ensure that the program is clear and that impacted tenants are prepared when applications open. So after I introduce panelists, we'll dive right in. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you have a chance to see the other wonderful folks who have been working hard to get these programs launched. And, oh, I'm sorry. Thanks everyone for bearing with me. All right, and if I could ask, there we go, I accidentally turned off my own video. It looks like all of our panelists have their videos on. I wanted to start by introducing, although she doesn't have her video on, Kelsey Grenzer, who's been the marketing specialist working with us to get the word out. Thank you so much for being part of the webinar today, Kelsey, and she'll be helping to monitor things in the background along with Brian Durr from our marketing communications team. We really appreciate their support. Also joining us from Pinellas County Housing and Community Development is Community Development Manager Bruce Bussey. Housing Section Manager Sherry Lynn Harris. and Project Administration Section Manager Joe Riddle. And then we're co-hosting this webinar with our friends at the City of St. Pete. So joining us from St. Pete is Lynn Farr, the Housing Development Coordinator, and Joshua Johnson, the Director of Housing and Community Development. We're also pleased to have on the call with us the partners in the county's program. We have Tetra Tech from Tetra Tech, Calvin Knowles, who will be the county's project manager, working to help support this program. And Gloria Bowens is here from Neighborly Software, and she'll be helping us with a demo of some of the key functionality that's available to help support landlords through this process later in today's webinar. All right, so let me share the presentation again, and we will get right back to it. All right, so before we dig into the details, here's some key information about the new programs. These new programs, they're funded by the Federal Consolidated Appropriations Act that was passed in late December. It provides rental assistance for households who have lost their jobs or had a significant reduction in income due to COVID-19. This program does have federally required income and eligibility documentation, which does present a significant administrative burden, both for the program itself, but also for tenants and landlords. So that's a key point we want you all to be aware of, and why we're wanting to make sure that you have as much information as possible up front. The program provides up to 12 months of assistance that's paid directly to the landlord or property manager. And through the county's program, we also have mediation services that will be available for qualified applicants through the Pinellas Eviction Diversion Program. On March 31st, we'll be launching an online program navigator. This is a tool that's been developed where a resident can enter their address and it will route them and provide them information about what assistance programs are available to them based on their location. It'll launch with the emergency rental assistance programs, but it's there to be able to be expanded as additional assistance programs may become available. We'll give a demo of that a little bit later. Next up, I'm going to hand it over to Bruce to tell us a little bit more about some of the details of the program.
Thanks, Aubrey, and good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to briefly talk a little bit today about eligibility for the program, both who is eligible for this program and what kind of expenses and costs are eligible. In terms of the who is eligible, there's three primary criteria. There are requirements for income eligibility in this program, unlike some of the other previous programs. First and foremost, a household has to have been financially impacted by COVID. That typically means a loss of employment, a reduction in employment, or some other hardship directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're talking to you as landlords and property managers today. That's because there is a limit to this program for rental assistance only. Other programs have been provided in the past that also provided mortgage assistance, but this program is specific for rental households. The income limits are shown on the chart to the right. There's an income limit requirement of 80% of the area median income. And the federal requirements also require that we prioritize households at lower incomes, those households below 50% AMI, or if they've been unemployed for over 90 days. So we've developed a program that will categorize and prioritize as required for the lower income groups and hope to move into the higher under 80 group as soon as possible. So with that, those are the requirements for a household to meet the general eligibility requirements. And then the next slide, we'll talk about what type of assistance is provided. You could go ahead and move to the next slide, Aubrey. Again, this is focused on rent. Our priority is to make the rent payments. Rent is predominantly the largest portion of a household's monthly costs. And so we're really trying to target and focus on paying the rent. We can use the funds to pay past rent that's due all the way back to what'll be 1 year ago tomorrow. And so tenants that have got behind and have arrears on their rent payments, those are eligible expenses up all the way back to 12 months ago. We can also pay up to 3 months in advance on future rent payments for eligible households. for a total of up to 12 months combined. An example, if we're paying rent in advance for a household that may be, let's say, 2 months behind today, we'd want to pay those first 2 months of arrears, and then we could pay up to the next 3 months. At that time, we would have to income qualify the household once again to ensure that they remain eligible, and an additional 3 months could be paid up to a total amount of 12 months. That assistance will be paid directly to the property owner, the landlord, or the property manager, based on the lease and who the landlord is. And under limited circumstances, we will consider paying utilities if utilities are being threatened to be turned off and there's an immediate threat to the tenant of being evicted as a result of the utilities. We will, in those special circumstances, anticipate making some utility payments. But overall, we're going to focus first and foremost on getting the rent payments made. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lynn Farr to talk about the documents that are required so that we can determine this eligibility and process the payments as quickly as possible. Good afternoon, Lynn.
Bruce, we have one question before we move forward that I think applies here from Edith. The question is, what if they lost income before COVID-19 and are impacted by not being able to get back to work?
If the loss of income was prior to March 13th, 2020 and unrelated to COVID, that might not be eligible. If they lost income as a result of COVID, if their hours were reduced or a job was lost because that business was impacted by COVID-19, it could have been any time during that previous year that would make them eligible. But it kind of, again, it has to tie directly to a COVID-19 impact. Thank you for that question. Are there any others, Joe, for this topic?
One more here, yes. From Tara, how far back can we go on reimburse, and can we collect ones that left home and did not pay? So a two-part question.
Okay. In terms of going back, March 13th of 2020 is as far back as payments can go. To the second part of that question, the tenant would have to still remain in the unit. So if it's a tenant that left, let's say in October, and did not pay the rent, if they're no longer there, then they would not be eligible for that payment.
There are a couple other questions that have come out, and some I've responded to in the chat, but the question has come up about, will the presentation be available? So we'll address this a little bit later, but we do have outreach materials packet that we'll share out following the webinar. We'll include in that a copy of the slides from today's webinar so that you can receive those as well.
I think that's all the questions for now.
We advance it on and we'll go to Lynn. Lynn, it looks like you may be muted.
Sorry about that.
It's good luck.
First, we're going to cover documents that the tenant needs to provide. And first and foremost is the rental application that will need to be completed through the Neighborly software. In addition to the software, the application in the software, you'll need to collect documentation for income for any household members over the age of 18. And you'll notice on the screen, there's examples of acceptable documentation of income. We have seen in other past programs that there are hurdles. This is a hurdle for many applicants to apply, and it would be helpful if you could prepare your tenants for this information so they could start preparing for the submittal to the county and the city. In addition to income, we require copies of driver's license or IDs for any household member over the age of 18 and birth certificates for any minor household members as well. Next slide, Aubrey. Now we're going to cover what we need from you as the landlords or property managers. We'll need a copy of the lease for each unit of person is needing assistance. We'll need a W-9 from the landlord or the property manager, and copy of your past rent notice, late notice, or eviction notice, and a landlord acknowledgement, which this is for a future month's rent, which we may have some questions regarding what that exactly pertains to.
All right, thanks, Lynn. We've got the application portal demo up next. Joe, are there any questions that have come up in the meantime that we need to address at this point before we move on?
There is one here. Do I understand that clients have to be in the property currently under this program? We have a tenant that was impacted last summer by COVID and owes back rent, but has moved out.
Yeah, and per Bruce's earlier answer, our understanding is that they do have to be still in the residence. We will follow up to seek clarification, but that's our current understanding. All right. Are we ready to move on, Bruce or Joe, or did you have one more item?
I believe I'm good at this point, Aubrey.
All right, we'll circle back on any others a little bit.
Mhm.
All right, so next up we had a demo of our application portal, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick and switch to a live version of the test portal so you can get a sense of how this will work. So give me just a moment, bear with me. All right. Can you all now see, and if I could get the panelists, let me know too, you can see the program navigator now. So what we have done is in anticipation of, as we were developing this program, both the county and the city received funds to establish emergency rental assistance programs. We also know from our experience over the course of 2020 that there may be future relief bills and future relief and assistance programs that need to be administered. And so we've designed this COVID program navigator that allows a resident to type in their address and address at work, which is in Clearwater. And when you type in this, it will look up what jurisdiction your residence resides in and provide the link to the application portal for your specific jurisdiction. So this is one of the key ways that we're helping to make sure that for tenants and landlords, it's a clear place to go regardless of which jurisdiction in Pinellas County you're in or what assistance programs become available down the road. We'll add them to this tool over time. So I wanted to share that as a quick demo, and let me stop sharing that screen because next we're going to see a demo of some of the functionality within the Neighborly application portal. All right, so from here, if Gloria, if you want to take it over and provide that demo and share your screen, we'll.
Sure, I'm sharing my screen. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Gloria Bowens with Neighborly Software. And so I'm just going to give you all a high level overview of logging into the portal as well as what the landlord application looks like from your side. So Pinellas County will have the information right here. They'll have their backdrop. When you sign in for the first time, you're going to go to this registration area. And when you're completing your application or you're going in to kind of follow up on the status of what's going on, you'll be able to sign in here. I'm going to show you what the portal actually looks like, so you'll see what tenants and you will see. So give me 1 second. Load. Still loading. Okay. Here we go. All right. So when you log into the participant portal, the first thing you'll see is Pinellas County kind of emergency rental assistance program. And if your tenants or yourself, if you need something in alternative format, you'll have the information. For the first time, you'll either click on here where it says, select this option if you're a landlord in the city or county program. And if you're a tenant, the tenant will see this to log in. Now, once you've completed an application, there's some functionality that we have that you'll be able to see. If a case manager needs some additional information from you, they can send you a task basically telling you, hey, we're missing this W-9 information. Also, you'll be able to see as a landlord, and here's an example of a landlord right here, where your application is in progress. So as your case managers are reviewing your application and approving it, you will see this update. Also, if you are not able to complete the application at one time, you can go ahead and move forward and do it later. But there are some mandatory fields that you have to complete in order to do it. One thing that you'll also see on the portal, you'll be able to see for the landlord what you're approved, what you're dispersed, and what is remaining to be dispersed. So as your case manager is reviewing what's going on and has approved an actual expenditure for you up until the point that it gets dispersed, you'll be able to see that. So the portal is going to be your friend to see case activity of what's going on. Now, you won't be able to see on this front side what's going on with your tenants, but as a landlord, you will be able to see that. So I'm going to click over to the landlord application. And the first thing you'll see in the application is if the tenant has started the application, you'll be able to link to them through their client ID number. You will find the eligibility criteria for Pinellas County and St. Petersburg listed here, as well as the AMI for their different priority groups. It'll have the 80 and 50%. Next, we're going to ask you to put in your information as it appears on your W-9. If you do have a property manager, you're able to provide that information as well. And then this is where you'll upload your W-9 documentation. We do have a copy right here for you, so you can, upload it here, and download it and then upload it here. Also, if you need a mailing address for a check, that can be here. Pinellas County and the city may decide to have some additional documentation, and so most likely it will be here for you to upload. Here's a really great functionality as far as where you can invite tenants. So we know that tenants can apply, and if they're approved, then you will get linked to a portal in order to upload this information. But if you start the application process, let's say you're a multifamily property owner or you have 3 units, there's 2 ways that you can go about inviting tenants to apply. The first way is that you can go ahead and click here and add a new tenant. When you add a new tenant, it's required for you to have their email address. That's the only way that an invitation is going to go out. Secondly, we're going to ask you for information that's in addition to what Pinellas County and the city is asking for. We want to know your monthly rent, when your lease begin and ends, what past due rent, and what late fees you have. So this is some new functionality that we have just so that the county and the case managers can review, what you're saying the tenant has requested and what actually they may owe. Here for each tenant, you can also put a rent statement or arrearages. So you will have that functionality to provide additional information in regards to each tenant. Lastly, for you multifamily property owners, let's say you have 10 units and it's going to take you forever to, fill out this application one by one just to invite them. We do have this Excel sheet. And you can upload up to, 100 people if you needed to. But once you click here on this Excel spreadsheet, then you would fill it out and it has all the required information that we ask here. And then you can easily upload that tenant file. So if you are using some type of database such as Yardi, or I think it's called Rent something, I'm not sure. If you're using some type of database, it'll be easier for you to export that out and then just upload the information here with the template that we have. Lastly, you are going to submit the application. And when you submit, we are asking you for an electronic signature. So you will have to check each box as you go through. Once again, this will be finalized by the city and the county. And once you electronically sign, it will time and date stamp the application, as well as provide the IP address to the county. And that's just to help with fraud prevention and things like that. So that's the major part of the landlord application. One thing that is good as well, and I only have 1 tenant associated with this case, but let's say you have 3 tenants. You will be able to see the status of their application, actually what is budgeted and dispersed, as well as the draw. So while you can see that information on the front end on your participant portal, when you go into the application, you will also be able to see it on the back end. So that's a general overview of the landlord application. It's our software is cloud-based. It's smartphone and tablet compatible. So if you have to do this through your phone or your tablet, there's no problem with that. Additionally, this application can be done in up to 60 languages. And so when you go to the front-facing side of the participant portal, you're able to easily change it into your language of choice right here. And so that's for convenience for any non-English speakers that you have. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Gloria. And if you could stop sharing your screen and I'll pull the presentation back up. And just because I know folks had been very interested in whether the presentation or a recording would be sent out, we do have slides in the slide deck that we'll be sharing out that cover some of the functionality that Gloria was just mentioning. So just to recap, through the Neighborly portal, tenants will have the ability, or landlords and property managers will have the ability to invite tenants to participate in the program directly from the application portal. And then secondly, once there's an application submitted, you can check the status of payments on behalf of tenants within that Neighborly system. So no wondering where the case is or what the status is or where your payment's at. You'll be able to check for updates anytime that you'd like directly in that system. I see that there are a lot of questions that have come up and we're nearly to the Q&A. So if there's no objections, we'll hold on answering questions so we can make sure we don't miss anything. Lastly, in terms of property managers resources, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a tenant outreach kit that we'll be sending out to attendees on today's webinar following our wrap up. It covers today's presentation, but also we've got materials like sample newsletter blurbs, email materials that you can include in emails out to your tenants, as well as working on flyers and other materials that you can use to help spread the word and get the news out to tenants who may be eligible. Just as an aside, I wanted to share a recent, some recent survey results that were done nationwide, found that awareness of assistance programs was much higher among landlords and property managers than it was among tenants. So that was a clear indication to us that we were on the right track in engaging landlords and property managers early, and that you all are a key part to how we make sure that tenants who are eligible are availing themselves of the assistance that's here. So now we will open it up to questions. I'll take a look at the ones in the chat, and we've got some that have been voted up a bit, so we'll start with some of those. The first that I see here, and Joe, if you'll keep an eye on hands going up, if there's anyone who would like to ask a question live, you can have that opportunity again. I'll just remind you of the ground rules. Please be kind in your questions and keep questions to under 2 minutes so we can be respectful of everyone's time. So will landlords and property managers be able to apply on behalf of residents? As we said, the resident will still need to complete and submit an application. However, the landlords can submit and invite tenants to apply through the portal. Thank you, Kelsey, for managing that, the questions for me. We have unresponsive tenants who are unlikely to file for any sort of rental assistance on their own. Is there a program in place for owners to file for financial relief from tenants in total default and unresponsive? I am really sorry to hear that, Brian, that's been your experience. We're going to push hard to get outreach and provide support to tenants so that they are encouraged and supported in applying. However, this program is not intended to address those who are completely unresponsive. As part of the program, a tenant who is not responsive in providing information for that's required for the application will get 3 follow-up attempts over the course of 21 days. So we're trying to provide the greatest opportunity for tenants to get on board, get the assistance they need, get the support they need, and be able to be successful in applying. but ultimately it is on them to apply. Nicole, yeah.
Aubrey, we do have 4 people with their hands up if we want
Oh,
to.
outstanding. Yeah, let's go ahead and take some of those, and I'll let you handle naming off who's got questions.
Andy, I see your hand up. If you could unmute yourself and ask your question and limit your question to 2 minutes, please.
Unmute. Here we go.
There we go.
There. I was just trying
Andy?
to find a window for the unmute. Quick question. Okay, I have a tenant who qualified under the previous CARES Act and was awarded the full amount of the $5,000. Now she's fallen behind again. She's a single mom, so I want to try to work with her. She was very quick to, apply for that. So is this program, this 12 months plus the additional future rent potentially, does this wrap the CARES Act payments in the backdated fashion, or is this just a whole new program that totally ignores what was previously distributed? Does that make any sense here?
I think so, and I'll try to respond. And thank you for the question, because it's an excellent one, and one that I expect others have as well. So this is a brand new program. However, as with any federal relief program, there cannot be any duplication of benefits, which in plain English means if a month's rent was paid by another assistance program or other federal funds, it cannot be covered by this new program. So in this particular case, let's say she had gotten March and April of 2020's rent covered through Pinellas Cares and the 211 Financial Assistance Program. She would not be eligible to have March and April covered under this new Emergency Rental Assistance Program. But let's say she didn't get assistance with May and June's rent, those months would be eligible.
Right, and that's where we're at. So I just wanted to make sure that it's a, going forward, okay, subsequent months after that, obviously, you can't double dip on that. And then in the previous program too, it was where I had to supply the W-9 to her, which had my social security number on there, but it seemed like that's the only way it worked to get it. I like what you guys have set up here where I provide my own personal information to you guys and I don't have to route it through somebody else's hands. So yes, definitely saner.
Great. Well, thanks so much for the question. Joe, do we have someone else coming up?
Appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Next on our list is Gil. If you'll unmute yourself and ask your question, and please limit your comments to 2 minutes, please.
And Gil, you will need to unmute yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Mute. Okay.
There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Question. What is the total amount, the capital amount of the grant program? And is it first come, first serve? And obviously there's no guarantee it'll be refunded. That's one question. Number two, the grant program allowed for setup costs for the bureaucratic employees. Is that offset the salary that you normally get per week from the county? And how does that work? Where the money that's appropriated to set up the program, is that paying for your salary? And while that program is being run, you're not being paid by the taxpayers of Pinellas County?
So I'll take that question, and I can respond on behalf of the Pinellas County. Certainly the city has their own resources and approach to those things. I wanted to make sure that I got both of your questions and answer them. So the first was, is there any cap on the dollar amount of assistance provided? Is that correct, Gil?
Yes.
Okay, so to answer that question, the program by the federal act is limited to 12 months of assistance, plus an additional 3 months if the individual continues to qualify. Pinellas County, we have not placed any additional restrictions on the dollar amount of that rental assistance. It is just limited by the months eligible.
Is the grant $1 million, $2 million, $3 million? What is the capital contribution for Pinellas County?
So Pinellas County received $21.4 million as part of the emergency rental assistance program. So that's up to 10% of that can be used for program administration costs. The bulk of that is going to support the functionality in the portal that you saw today, as well as the staff time for vendor additional resources that are handling the eligibility review. In prior programs, review of eligibility, and particularly when extensive income documentation is required, can significantly slow down processing of payments. So we decided to focus the core of our resources on making sure that that eligibility review goes quickly and smoothly and is adequately resourced.
All right, and so 10%.
As for myself, I am, I'm sorry, Gil, you cut out there for me.
So 10% of the 21 million is to run the program, and is that offset the amount of salary that you normally would get per week working for the county?
Yep, so I'm addressing that next. So in my case specifically, I am a salaried employee. I make the same amount whether I work 40 hours a week or 60, as I typically do, if not more. My salary is not getting reimbursed through the grant at all. I'm working on program development, resources, or other grant funded employees. Obviously, we have to make sure that those resources are compensated for the work that they're performing, and that the program is adequately supported, because if we don't have the staff capacity to process applications and payments, we know that that results in delays for landlords and tenants, and that's absolutely not what we want to happen.
Well, you didn't answer my question. Where does the money, the 10% that goes into the general fund for the county? How does that cross-reference cross over? So if the 10% is not utilized, does that go back into the fund that's eligible, the more money eligible
Yep.
for tenants?
So any funds that are not used directly to administer the program are available for assistance.
Right. So how
We're
does the
working to
county
make sure the most of funds are available for assistance, while ensuring that the program is adequately resourced to be administered efficiently and effectively.
How does the county track the money that's allocated to running the program against the salaries that are paid to you weekly?
That's all in our financial accounting system. And Gil, I'd be happy to follow up with you one-on-one offline after the webinar, but we really want to make sure that landlords have the key information. And I know that there's a lot of other questions we still need to get to. So we have your email from registering. I'll reach out to you via email.
All right, Aubrey, we have a couple more hands up if we want to do a couple more of those. Maggie, if you'll unmute yourself and ask your question and limit our comments and question here to 2 minutes.
Hi, Maggie. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for this. I also manage a homeowners association, and some homeowners, have fallen behind on their dues. Does this program also help homeowners? Or just strictly?
Yeah, this program is specifically limited to renters per the federal act. We are seeing that the new relief bill does include some mortgage assistance, so we're watching that closely and looking for additional federal guidance as more of that becomes available. But this program is limited to renters.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
We do one more question, Aubrey, and then we can get back to our Q&A questions there. Myra, you have your hand up. If you'll unmute and ask your question.
And while Myra, you're getting unmuted, I just want to remind folks you can upvote questions in the chat, in the Q&A. So if you see something that you'd like to have answered, let us know.
Myra, we're ready for you if you'll unmute.
That's
Yep, we lost. Okay. Looks like we're having a little technical difficulty, so we want to move to the Q&A. Aubrey?
I have a question.
Sandra,
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Thank you. Yes, I have a tenant and we more or less had a verbal lease. I know that one of the things you need to attach when updating into the internet the information as a landlord for the tenant. What do you do under those circumstances? The tenant is still there. I have sent him notification on several occasions in regards to, of course, moving, but we more or less had a verbal agreement. Is there, what do I need to do because of the verbal agreement?
We will need some documentation of what the rent amount is. I think we'll need to follow up and clarify in the program guidance as we move closer to implementation, what would be allowable for that. Sherry, it looked like maybe you were going to unmute. Did you have anything to add there?
I would add that if we have some sort of documentation that shows the rent amount in lieu of the lease, some documentation with the utility, something that shows that they're there and this is the amount of rent that they're paying, we can probably work with that. I will also add though that it will deter from the 3 months in advance because there is no lease in place. So that may come into play just a little bit.
Thank you.
And Aubrey, we have Myra ready now. So Myra, if you will unmute, we can get your question answered. You're unmuted, Myra. Myra, you're in. There you go.
I can't hear you, Myra. Are you speaking? Well, I do see that there's a couple questions. One, Cassandra, I love where you're headed. Will there be any issues if tenants use our office computers to apply because of the IP address? No, that's not an issue at all. And I love the fact that you're thinking of encouraging your tenants and helping them to apply by allowing them to use your computers. That's a great thing. Thank you. All right, I'm still not hearing anything from Myra. I see that Jordan has asked applications open March 31st. Is that for all at one time or just priority group 1 under 50% AMI? Applications open March 31st for all of the applicants, not just those in the priority group under 50%. See, I see Elizabeth asked if residents need to reimburse the landlord for utilities in the lease. Is that eligible for reimbursement? Yes, utilities that are included as part of the lease agreement are considered as rent, and that is an eligible cost for the assistance. Can we start on applications now? I love it, Tara, that you're ready to get going on this. We have our final slide is a call to action. And what we'd like you to do now is sign up for updates, share information with your tenants, and start helping them to make sure they're prepared to apply when applications open. We know that the documentation requirements under this federal program are pretty significant. And so the earlier start tenants can get on getting things together, the better off they'll be. Sherry, we've got one here around the income requirement and the basis of that. So if you wouldn't mind responding, I'll read off the question here. Is the income requirement based on current income? The W-2 may be higher than the income eligibility, but current income has been 0 for many months. So can you share a little bit more detail on what the basis of the income requirement is?
Sure, there's a couple ways that we can look at the income qualifications. So if you've got a tax return that is from 2020, we can look at that for the arrears and the first 3 months. If that tax return hasn't been filed, then we would have to look at their most recent pay stubs or verification of the pay stubs, essentially, of what their current income is. If they are not receiving income, but have unemployment, a copy of that unemployment award letter will also suffice. Does that
Thanks.
answer the question?
I think it may, but if not, feel free to ask again, folks, if you need more clarification on that point. Jordan had followed up to ask if landlords would have access prior to March 31st. The portal will launch for everyone, landlords, tenants, on March 31st. That is the reason that March 31st date, we have to get the system configured, and we certainly don't want any applicants to be impacted by changes to the system and configuration post-launch. So we want to make sure we get it configured correctly and it's working properly for everyone.
Aubrey, we have two more hands if we would like to get one of those at this point.
That sounds great. Yeah, we've got time to take both.
Okay. Estavini Lopez, you're unmute and you can ask your question at this point.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, thank you for the seminar. So I just wanted to know whether the landlords will, I don't know if the question has been answered, I joined a little late. If the landlords will be able to submit an application on behalf of the resident?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question, because while we did cover it in the presentation, it's an important point. So landlords can invite tenants to apply through the application portal. However, the tenant themselves will need to complete and submit the application. Landlords are certainly encouraged to provide any assistance that they can to help applicants with submitting that application, but there is action required by the applicant to submit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And David, it looks like.
Mm-hmm. David, if you'll go ahead and unmute, you will be ready for your question. David Bauer.
Hey, how you doing?
Thanks, David. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Quick question. So I see that they use 2 months of bank statements. Starting when? Would that be on the date of the portal being open? Have to be back from that point?
Sherry, can you respond on how the income matches up with the application date?
Sure. Well, once they submit the application, what we ask for with the bank statements is the two most recent. So if they apply April 1, we would want to see, the 2 months previous.
Okay. Thank you. Follow up if you don't mind. So, for example, I think this weekend a lot of people are going to be getting families of 4, maybe 5 grand in assistance, which will, of course, spike people's accounts. How do you cross-reference what they have liquid versus what their income is? And does that create a assistance for rent in part? Is it a sliding scale or is it an all or nothing? And what would be the cutoffs on those markers?
Aubrey, do you want me to try to answer this?
If you feel like you can, I didn't completely follow, but it sounds like David's got a great level of detail of understanding of things.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to make it simpler. So for example, you're looking at not only unemployment assistance if they're on that, or if they didn't have income in 2020, or even, do you look at all 2019 taxes, or is it just 2020 income and or unemployment assistance?
It would be the tax return would be 2020, which would be the most recent. And we recognize that there's not going, there will be some that don't have a 2020 tax return yet. So that's when we'll start to look at the other, which would be unemployment payments that they're receiving, or if they're working reduced hours, those are the types of documentation we would be looking for in lieu of the return. And I think the other piece of what you were asking, David, is when they receive these other payments through the stimulus, to my knowledge, and we've seen that in some of the other programs we're working with, those stimulus checks and so forth are not part of their income. So we would, if we saw that in the bank statement, we wouldn't be necessarily counting that as the income.
Okay. So for example, the average rent of a tenant or, house mortgage is $1,000 to $2,000. And so if, for example, people have been saving, let's say they have enough to cover that amount, or would it, the point is, it's like, for example, they could probably pay a chunk, but they would wipe out their entire, bank account. So how do you qualify, or how do you rate? Is it an all or nothing, or do you look at how much money they have saved? Do you do percentage?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Sherry, but the income eligibility requirement is based on income, not how much they have in savings. So
Okay, so the bank statements.
is that correct, Sherry?
No, that is not correct.
Okay.
We do have to look at the assets, but David, to your point, if just because they have savings, our income calculations based on HUD are on a certain percentage that's imputed. So the fact of the matter is really looking at the interest they earn on that savings account, not actually what's in the savings account. So they're not going to be impacted in that way if they've got savings.
Okay. However, it did say savings and checking account.
That is correct. And when we're looking at the checking account, we're looking at the deposits that come in, trying to match up, if they've got unemployment, is it coming through the bank account? That would be through the checking. If they've got an employer where they're receiving reduced hours, that's going to show up in the checking account. That's the reason that we look for the checking account, so that we can do verification.
Okay. And one more point. Part of the qualification is that their income has been reduced by a certain percentage as opposed to a standard year, right? So wouldn't you have to know the 2019 income, compare it against the 2020 income, and then cross-reference it with the bank statements?
David, what we would do in that instance is, if they're saying that they have reduced hours, we would take documentation from the employer that indicates that this is where they were at and this is what their hours have been reduced to, and calculate it on the reduced hours.
What if they're self-employed or gig worker? Because a lot of people have partial income, self-stated, self-employed too. I'm sorry, I probably have too much caffeine. I'll keep you here for 10 hours probably.
Yeah, and David, those are excellent questions, and the examples provided both in the slide and on the FAQs that are on the county's website are intended as examples. We know from prior programs, there's a variety of ways that people are earning income in today's economy, and we'll make every effort to be flexible to accommodate that variety. But these lists aren't intended to be all inclusive, and will continue to be updated as we develop the program further. The other thing I wanted to make sure to mention is, given that we're just about out of time here, and we may have a chance to get to one or two more questions. And I totally lost my train of thought. David, I'm also on too much caffeine today, so.
That's okay. But one quick point, will we expect that these will also be partial reimbursements? Someone may apply for the full amount, but they may get partial, or I guess, or
our intent is not to limit the amount that they would be eligible for. So if they have so much due, we're not putting a constraint on what percentage of that can be reimbursed if it is indeed all eligible. The point I was going to make is, I know there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to. I wanted to assure everyone, if we didn't get to your questions today, it doesn't mean we haven't heard them. We'll continue to update the FAQs on the program webpage over the coming weeks, and we'll work to make sure that we address these questions that you've asked, because we really appreciate understanding that those are pieces of information you all need.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David. I've got one more question here. I know I see Samantha and Sandra that you have your hands up. In the interest of time, we're not going to be able to take any more questions with the hands raised, but if you'd like to type those in the Q&A so we can make sure we respond and capture any follow-up in our FAQ updates over the coming weeks, that would be outstanding. I did see Bob Kelsey, you had asked if someone has provided a CDC declaration, will this affect them in applying? This does not, if they've provided a CDC declaration, that does not prevent them from applying for assistance through this program. So I wanted to make sure to mention that in case others have tenants in a similar situation where they've already provided a CDC declaration form. All right, with that, I'm gonna, let's see, I think I still have my screen shared with the presentation. So we're gonna wrap up on questions. Feel free if there's thoughts that still come to mind as we're going through this last slide to type them in the Q&A there, and we'll capture them over the coming weeks as we update FAQs. So thank you all again so much for attending. Thank you for your terrific engagement with the questions and the chat. We really appreciate hearing you. We know that this was a lot to take in, and there's places where we don't have a lot of the detail yet out ready to share, but that'll be added to the county webpage over the coming weeks. So we encourage you to sign up for updates by texting Pinellas Rent to 888-777. Push notifications will be sent out each time we update program information on the county webpage. We also encourage you to share information with your tenants. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out that tenant outreach materials following today's webinar, and that'll include a copy of the slides from today. And David, you're still unmuted, so just be aware. And then lastly, consider offering tenants assistance collecting and scanning required documentations. As we've said, we've seen that be a considerable barrier and hurdle for applicants in being successful with their application. So any support that you can provide, as we mentioned earlier, you all have a direct relationship with your tenants, and we are so excited to have you be part of helping this program be successful. We'll continue sharing information, and thank you again so much for participating. I'll stop sharing my screen here so all of our panelists can turn their cameras on and wave a little goodbye. And thank you all so much for joining us today.